Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The crash was anything but gentle. Calvera's escape pod tore through Zephyrian's emerald canopy like a meteor, slamming into the damp earth with a bone-rattling thud. Smoke curled from the wreckage as he kicked open the dented hatch, coughing as the planet's thick, bioluminescent air filled his lungs. "Great," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Another paradise. His survival scanner flickered. No major injuries, but the comms were fried. No calling for help. Just him, a jungle pulsing with alien life, and whatever predators lurked in the shadows. A low growl rippled through the undergrowth. Cale froze. Something was watching him. Slowly, he turned, and his breath caught. Eyes, glowing violet, unblinking, locked onto his. Then the foliage parted, revealing a creature of nightmare and majesty. The Shadowfang. Six-legged, fur like liquid obsidian, fangs longer than Cal's forearm. The apex predator of Zephyrian. Cal's hand hovered over his plasma knife, but something stopped him. The beast wasn't attacking. It tilted its head, sniffing the air. Cal swallowed. Easy. He extended his palm. Empty. Not here to fight. The Shadowfang rumbled, a sound like distant thunder. Then, it stepped closer. A twig snapped. "Do not move." The voice was melodic yet sharp, speaking in accented universal. Cale turned, and his pulse spiked. A tall, turquoise-skinned woman stood atop a mossy boulder, a crystalline bow aimed at his chest. Her silver-white hair cascaded over shoulders, adorned with glowing tribal markings, pulsing like starlight. Ziara, princess of the Luminari. Her eyes flicked between him and the Shadowfang, wide with disbelief. "You?" Her voice trembled. "You tamed our apex predator." Cale blinked. But tamed is a strong word. The Shadowfang chuffed, nudging his hip like an overgrown housecat. Ziara's bow lowered slightly, her bioluminescence flickering in shock. "Impossible," she whispered. Cale grinned. "Human specialty." Zara's grip on her bow tightened as she watched the Shadowfang circle Cale like a curious pet. "This is forbidden," she hissed, her bioluminescent markings pulsing a deep crimson. Anger, fear, disbelief. Cale kept his hands raised, but the beast merely rubbed its massive head against his side, nearly knocking him over. "See," he chuckled, scratching behind its ear. "Not so scary." Ziara's eyes narrowed. "That creature has slaughtered dozens of our hunters. It does not befriend outsiders." A rustle in the trees. 5 more luminary warriors dropped from the canopy, their crystalline spears aimed at Cale. Their markings flared in unison. Threat detected. The Shadowfang growled, fur bristling. "Wait," Ziara snapped, raising a hand. "Do not attack." One warrior, a scarred male with amber-glowing tattoos, snarled. "Princess, that beast is a killer. And this intruder controls it. He is a danger." Cale sighed. "Look, I just crashed here. I'm not controlling anything." Ziara stepped closer, studying him. "Then explain why it obeys you." "Maybe it's lonely." Cale shrugged. "Or maybe it's just never met a human before." The warriors exchanged glances. Ziara's markings shifted from red to a wavering gold, curiosity overpowering caution. "You will come with us," she declared. "The elders will decide your fate." The settlement was nothing like Cale expected. Instead of huts, the Luminary lived in living tree cities, their homes grown from colossal, bioluminescent megaflora. Bridges of woven vines connected towering canopies, and the air hummed with alien birdsong. As they walked, villagers stopped to stare, their markings flickering in shock at the sight of a human walking beside their apex predator. "They've never seen an outsider before, have they?" Cale murmured. Ziara's jaw tightened. The last ones who came did not leave peacefully. Cale didn't press further. At the village center stood the Elder's Sanctum, a massive tree with roots forming a natural throne. Seated upon it was High Elder Varys, an ancient luminary with sapphire markings that pulsed with slow, deliberate rhythm. "You bring a stranger and a Shadowfang into our heartwood." His voice was like crumbling stone. Zira bowed. "He claims no ill intent. The beast obeys him without force." The elder's gaze locked onto Kale. "What is your name, human?" "Calvera. Explorer, not a conqueror." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The elder leaned forward. "Prove it." The trial of bonds. Luminary tradition demanded a test of spirit. Kale was led to the Chamber of Echoes, a cavern where the walls pulsed with ancestral energy. "You must call the Shadowfang to you," Jaira explained. "Without words, without touch, only thought." Kale raised an eyebrow. "You want me to psychically summon a giant alien cat?" Ziara's markings flickered in amusement. "If your bond is true, it will come." Kale exhaled. He closed his eyes and focused. No tricks, no tech, just trust. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep, resonant growl echoed through the cavern. The Shadowfang emerged from the shadows, padding toward Kale as if drawn by an invisible thread. Even the elder's markings brightened in awe. Ziara's breath hitched. No outsider has ever passed the trial. Kale grinned. "Guess I'm special." The elder stood. "The ancestors have spoken. This human is permitted." But as the villagers murmured in wonder, Ziara's eyes lingered on Cal's hand, where the Shadowfang had nuzzled him. And for the first time she wondered, what else could a human do? The forbidden question. That night, under Zephyrian's twin moons, Zara found Kale sitting by a glowing river. "Your skin," she said abruptly. "It changes color when you are embarrassed." Kale blinked. "You mean blushing?" She reached out, then hesitated. "May I?" Kale nodded. Her fingers brushed his cheek, and instantly his face warmed. Ziara's markings flared bright blue. "Why does it do that?" Kale laughed. "Biology, emotions. Humans are reactive." Ziara tilted her head. "Show me more." Kale took her hand, pressing it to his chest, where his heartbeat quickened under her touch. Ziara's breath caught. "This is not what I expected from an alien." Kale smirked. "Neither is a princess who's obsessed with how I blush." She yanked her hand back, her markings flashing embarrassed violet. But she didn't leave. And Kale realized she was just as curious about him as he was about her. The twin moons cast an eerie glow over the jungle as Kale and Zara stood at the edge of the village, the tension between them still lingering from their strange encounter by the river. The air was thick with the scent of alien blossoms and something else, something metallic and wrong. Kale's hand went to his plasma knife instinctively. "You smell that?" Zara's markings pulsed a warning orange. "Something is coming." The ground trembled. Then the sky erupted in fire. 3 massive dropships tore through the atmosphere, their engines screaming as they descended toward the jungle. Kel recognized the insignia immediately. Nexus Galactic, the most ruthless mining corporation in the sector. "No," he breathed. "They can't be here." Ziara grabbed his arm, her claws pricking his skin. "What are those?" "Trouble." The lead dropship landed with a thunderous crash, crushing ancient trees beneath its weight. The hatch hissed open, and a squad of armored mercenaries marched out, their rifles scanning the jungle. At their head strode a woman in a sleek, black envirosuit, her helmet retracting to reveal a sharp, calculating face. Director Selvakar. Cal's stomach dropped. He'd crossed paths with her before, on Orion 9, where she'd strip-mined an entire ecosystem into oblivion. Ziara tensed beside him. Who is she? The kind of person who doesn't ask before she takes. Selva's voice boomed through an amplifier. Attention, indigenous life forms. By authority of Nexus Galactic, This planet is now under corporate jurisdiction. Cooperate, and you will be compensated. Resist, and you will be removed. A murmur of fear rippled through the luminary gathering behind them. Elder Varys stepped forward, his markings flaring defiantly. This world is ours. You have no right. A pulse rifle barked. The shot grazed the elder's shoulder, sending him staggering back. The villagers cried out, some reaching for weapons, others frozen in shock. Cale moved before he could think. He lunged in front of the elder, his knife humming to life. Back off, Selva. Selva's lips curled into a smirk. Cal Vera should have known you'd be here, plain hero. She gestured to her mercenaries. Secure the area. And someone put a leash on that damn human. Ziara let out a furious hiss, her markings blazing crimson. You will not touch him. Selva's eyes flicked to her, then widened slightly. Well, well, the locals are prettier than expected. She tilted her head. Tell me, princess, how much is your planet worth to you? Ziara bared her fangs. You cannot buy what is not yours. Selva sighed. Pity. She raised a hand. A deafening roar split the air. The Shadowfang exploded from the jungle, slamming into the nearest mercenary with enough force to send him flying. Chaos erupted. Pulse rifles fired wildly as the beast tore through the squad, its claws rending armor like paper. Cale didn't hesitate. He grabbed Ziara's wrist. We need to move. Now. She resisted for only a second before nodding. Together, they sprinted into the trees as gunfire, and screams echoed behind them. The jungle swallowed them whole. Cale led the way, his survival training kicking in as he wove through the dense foliage. Ziara kept pace effortlessly, her glowing markings dimmed to near invisibility in the shadows. They will not stop, she panted. Not after this. I know. Cale ducked under a low-hanging vine. But we can fight back. Ziara grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to face her. Why? Her voice was raw. Why would you risk yourself for us? Cale met her gaze. Because it's what humans do. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. Then, slowly, she leaned in. A twig snapped. They whirled, bracing for mercenaries. Instead, a small group of luminary hunters emerged from the brush, led by the scared warrior from before. His markings pulsed in wary recognition. Princess, he growled. The elder lives. But the outsiders, they have begun digging near the heartroot. Ziara went rigid. No. Cale frowned. What's the heartroot? The core of our world, she whispered. If they damage it. She didn't need to finish. Cal's jaw set. Then we stop them. The scared warrior bared his fangs. With what army? A slow, feral grin spread across Cal's face. Who said anything about an army? He turned and whistled sharply. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the bushes parted, and glowing violet eyes blinked out from the darkness. The Shadowfang. And behind it, more. Dozens of them. Ziara's breath caught. You cannot be serious. Cale patted the nearest beast's flank. You wanted to see what humans can do. He met her gaze. Let me show you. The jungle trembled under the weight of heavy machinery as Nexus Galactic's drills bit deep into Zephyrian soil. Cale crouched on a moss-covered ridge, watching through stolen binoculars as mercenaries erected a perimeter around the excavation site. The air stank of ionized metal and something darker, something that made the Shadowfangs behind him growl low in their throats. Ziara's hand clamped on his shoulder, her claws pricking through his torn shirt. They're too many, she whispered, her bioluminescent markings dimmed to near invisibility. Even with the pack, we cannot fight them all. Cale lowered the binoculars, his knuckles white around them. We don't have to fight them. Just slow them down. He turned to the scared warrior. Torvak, he'd learned the hunter's name was. How long until they reached the heartroot? Torvak's markings pulsed an anxious yellow. Before next moonrise. They're machines. They chew through stone like soft fruit. A cold certainty settled in Cal's gut. He'd seen Nexus's mining operations before. Entire mountains reduced to rubble in hours, ecosystems stripped bare. But this was different. The way Selva's teams worked with military precision, the strange instruments they'd set up around the drill site. This wasn't just mining. They were searching for something. A rustle in the undergrowth. One of the younger Shadowfangs, a sleek female with silver-tipped fur, padded forward and dropped something at Cal's feet, a mangled piece of tech still sparking. Ziara inhaled sharply. Is that corporate comms gear? Cal picked it up, wiping mud from the cracked screen. The device flickered to life, displaying fragmented text. Primary objective confirmed. Specimen retrieval protocol. His blood ran cold. They're not here for minerals. Torvak snarled. Then what do they want? Cal's eyes met Ziara's. The answer came to them both at the same time. The Shadowfangs, she breathed. A memory surfaced. Selva's smirk when the first beast had attacked. Not fear. Interest. The kind a scientist shows a rare specimen. Cal crushed the device in his fist. They're hunting your apex predators. Probably for weapons research. Or to sell. Ziara finished, her voice hollow. Her markings flared crimson. We cannot let them take even one. Torvak shifted uneasily. The heartroot is connected to them, Cal realized suddenly. That's why the Shadowfangs protect it. That's why they react when the drills get close. He turned to Ziara. The mineral veins Nexus is after. They're not just energy sources, are they? Ziara's silence was answer enough. The jungle seemed to hold its breath around them. Then, from the direction of the village, a distant explosion shattered the night. Torvak's head snapped up. The sanctum. They ran. Smoke curled above the tree line as they burst into the village clearing. Half the living structures were ablaze, their bioluminescent sap burning with unnatural blue flames. Luminary lay wounded in the dirt, while others fought desperately against black-armored mercenaries. And at the center of it all stood Selva, her boot planted on Elder Varys' chest as he struggled to rise. Last chance, old man, she purred, pressing a plasma pistol to his temple. Tell me where the alpha specimen nests, and maybe I'll let your people live. Cal moved without thinking. His plasma knife found the first mercenary's throat before the man could turn. The second went down to Torvak's spear. The Shadowfangs hit the remaining guards like a living storm, tearing, ripping, silencing guns before they could fire. Selva whirled, her pistol coming up. Ziara was faster. She lunged, claws extended, and slammed into Selva with enough force to send them both crashing into the sanctum's roots. The pistol skittered away. They rolled, a tangle of limbs and fury. Ziara's fangs bared as she raked at Selva's reinforced suit. Cal made to help, then froze as cold metal pressed against the back of his skull. Don't. A mercenary's breath hot on his neck. Director's orders. You're worth more alive. The world narrowed to the hammering of his pulse. Then, a snarl, a blur of black fur. The Shadowfang female tore the mercenary away before he could pull the trigger. Cal stumbled forward, gasping, just in time to see Ziara pin Selva against the sanctum's trunk. You will leave, Ziara hissed, her markings blazing like wildfire. Now. Selva spat blood, but her smirk never wavered. Or what? You'll kill me? Her fingers twitched toward her belt. Bad idea, princess. The device in her hand beeped once before Cal could shout a warning. The explosion knocked them all off their feet. Cal hit the ground hard, ears ringing. Through the smoke, he saw the sanctum's great tree shudder, then begin to topple, its roots torn apart by whatever charges Selva had planted. Ziara screamed, not in pain, in grief. The world came back in fragments. First, pain, a throbbing ache behind Cal's eyes, the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. Second, sound, the distant roar of engines, the panicked cries of Luminari. and beneath it all, a deep, rhythmic pulse that vibrated through the ground. Third, her. Sierra crouched over him, her markings flickering erratically between despair and fury. One of her claws gently tapped his cheek. "Wake up, human. We need you." Cale groaned, forcing himself upright. The village was in ruins. The great sanctum tree lay toppled, its roots exposed, and at its center, the heartroot, that glowing crystalline core, oozing golden fluid into the soil. Around it, the surviving luminary pressed their hands to the earth, their bioluminescent markings dimming as if draining into the planet itself. "What are they doing?" Cale rasped. "Trying to heal it," Sierra said. "But it's not enough." Torvak staggered toward them, one arm hanging limp at his side. "The outsiders took 3 of the pack," he snarled, "including the alpha female." Cale's stomach twisted. "Selva." Sierra's claws flexed. "They will not leave orbit alive." Cale pushed to his feet, swaying slightly. "We need to move. Now." He turned toward the jungle, then froze. The Shadowfangs were gathering. Not just the few who had fought beside them. Dozens, slinking from the trees, their violet eyes fixed on the dying heartroot. The largest, a monstrous male with scars crisscrossing his muzzle, padded forward and sniffed the golden sap. Then it let out a howl that shook the leaves from the branches. "They feel it too," Sierra whispered. "The heartroot is linked to them. If it dies, they die with it," Cale finished. A terrible understanding settled over him. This wasn't just about saving a village. This was about the soul of the planet itself. The plan. Cale crouched in the dirt, sketching lines with a broken shard of crystal. "Nexus ships are vulnerable during ascent, if we can hit them before they break atmosphere." "With what?" Torvak growled. "Spears and fangs." "No." Cale's gaze flicked to the Shadowfangs. "With them." Sierra stiffened. "You want to ride the pack into battle." "Not just ride." Cale met her eyes. "I need you to trust me." Her markings pulsed. Doubt, fear, then resolve. She nodded. The largest Shadowfang rumbled as Cale approached. Up close, the beast smelled of ozone and iron, its breath hot enough to fog Cale's face. He reached out slowly and pressed his palm to the creature's forehead. Nothing happened. Then, a jolt, like electricity arcing between them. Cale's vision whited out. Images flooded his mind. Ancient forests, generations of Shadowfangs hunting beneath twin moons, the heartroot pulsing like a living star. And beneath it all, a song, low and resonant, vibrating through bone and blood. The Shadowfang howled. And suddenly, Cale understood. The storm. They moved as one. Cale and Sierra mounted the alpha male, her arms locked around his waist as the beast surged forward. Behind them, the rest of the pack flowed like a living shadow through the trees, their howls shaking the earth. Above, the Nexus dropship was just lifting off, its engines screaming. "Faster," Cale urged. The Shadowfang leaped. For one impossible moment, they soared, claws outstretched, and slammed into the ship's hull. Metal shrieked. The ship listed violently, one engine sputtering. Inside, Cale glimpsed Selva's shocked face through the viewport. Then they were falling. The impact knocked the breath from Cale's lungs. He rolled, gasping, just in time to see the crippled dropship crash into the jungle. The pack converged. Selva stumbled from the wreckage, her suit torn, one arm clutched to her ribs. "You." She raised a pistol. Sierra was faster. She lunged, claws flashing. And the gun clattered to the ground, along with 3 of Selva's fingers. The corporate director screamed, collapsing to her knees. Cale staggered to his feet. "Call off your ships." Selva spat blood. "Or what? You'll kill me." "No." Cale looked toward the heartroot. "But they will." The Shadowfangs circled, their growls vibrating the air. Selva's defiance crumbled. She fumbled for her comm with shaking hands. "All units, abort mission. Immediate retreat." The remaining dropships fled, streaking into the sky like startled birds. Silence fell. Then, a pulse. Golden light erupted from a heartroot, washing over the jungle in a radiant wave. Where it touched, the scorched earth healed. The fallen sanctum tree shuddered and began to regrow, its branches reaching for the sky. Ziara's breath caught. It's alive. Kale turned to her and found her staring at him with something new in her eyes. So are we, he said softly. Epilogue. The celebration lasted for 3 days. Luminary and Shadowfangs feasted together beneath the restored sanctum tree, their ancient enmity forgotten. Torvak even grudgingly admitted humans weren't entirely useless. And Zanera. She found Kel at the jungle's edge, watching the twin moons rise. You're leaving, she said. Not a question. Kale sighed. My people will come looking eventually. Ziara stepped closer. Her markings glowed soft blue in the moonlight. Then let them find you here. She pressed a hand to his chest. And this time, when his heartbeat raced, she smiled. After all, she murmured, you still have much to teach me about human reactions. Kale laughed, pulling her close as the Shadowfangs howled their approval beneath the stars. Some bonds, he thought, were worth crossing the galaxy for.